My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Kenny and Allison McMahon. It's August 3rd, 2023. We're at their new wine warehouse in McMinnville. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
First question is why wine?
So we have very different stories. My why wine is, so I studied biology as a bachelor's at Santa Clara. And so I was living in the Bay Area after I graduated, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I had an interest in science, but wasn't really sold on any one route yet. I knew I wanted to pursue higher education. I really liked, learning and lab and research. And so I was wine tasting with some friends and family. And the more we did it, the more I realized I could apply my biology background to this. And that would be a pretty cool way to make a career. So I started looking for programs where I could study wine. I found the food science program at Washington State at the time. Enology and viticulture was very closely tied in with food science. And so I ended up studying sensory science of wine. And that was a pretty cool fit. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into the industry.
Why wine for me is rooted in a memory. So wine's really more or less a vector for memories. And so Allison talked about sensory, which is driven by memories, all by the senses. And I was 12 and traveling with my parents to Napa, California. It was during harvest. And we were up in the mountains, up on Howe Mountain. It was still foggy. It was 5 a.m. They got us up, and our family friends were like, "Oh, we got a wine tasting, but it has to be 6 a.m." And so it was the full deal. Foggy, cold, crisp, but the buzzers of the humming of the forklifts beeping, and the tour guide was the winemaker. And he said, reach over the bins and grab yourself some grapes, and, bees are flying around and stuff. And I remember tasting them, and they were just so, quenching. And it was Chardonnay, probably Wente for all I know. But it lasted in my mind as far as, this memory. And so that to me is why wine is, this vector is a memory found type of drink and kind of beverage. So... And it spawned into other things, we went down to the caves and sniffed and burned our noses on barrels fermenting, so that led into, skipping a lot of steps. We can go into the linearity of how I got to wine, but yeah, that's the origin of my wine journey.
So Allison, let's go back to you for a moment. Talk about life before college. Where were you born and raised, and what was what kind of preceded going to school?
So I was born in California, but I moved back and forth between California and Washington a number of times, back and forth. And so I guess I would call Washington home more so. And yeah, I was always interested in science, and I thought maybe healthcare was kind of the way that would manifest. But when I started kind of sticking my big toe into all these different types of positions I could have, I was an EMT on campus as a college student, and I worked in the physical therapy clinic on campus, or I also worked in an optometry clinic. So I was trying out all these different kind of ways that I could do that, and nothing really didn't seem like it was 100% the right fit for me. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I was so kind of in this place after our graduation, where I was wondering, do I really want to commit to something that I'm not 100% sure about yet, or do I want to keep looking? And that's when I really started thinking about wine. And what I liked about the experiences I had when I was tasting around with my friend and her family was that the community and how just the experience that you can create for someone, and like Kenny said, the memories that you can create with kind of wine as a part of that experience. And so it felt like a really natural blend of this people side of things and this experience side of things and the science, which I really liked. So.
Well, you, Kenny, where were you born and raised, and what was sort of life leading up to school?
Yeah, born and raised in Kentucky, northern Kentucky. So all my family is still there. My parents and my sister are in Atlanta now. And so we're planning our trip back soon, actually. But yeah, grew up in Kentucky. running around the hills outside of Cincinnati, fishing in the woods, whatever. Went to school at a small college, Center College, in the middle of Center being, at the time, that's why they called it Center College. It was the center of the state at the time. Very small, like 1,000 students when I went there. Played tennis for the team for a couple years. Realized, I'm putting in a lot of work and effort, and, being sixth man on the team, I didn't want to play anymore. I wanted to just do it for fun and focus on my school. And so in between years in college, I started, well, actually it was probably before college, I started doing internships. So 16 when I first started driving, did an internship at a micro lab, started in the autoclave room, and then doing cell counts. And it was for contract work for P&G. So P&G was huge in Cincinnati, still are. But I realized I don't want to sit in a lab without windows and be there counting cells all the time. And there's a
full circle. Kenny was just counting cells the other day.
Yeah, full circle, and which I love. But as a teenager, oh my gosh, what is the point here? I didn't see the end point of this, and ended up doing, it's sort of similar to what Allison was doing in college, gene splicing. That was my junior year before senior year in college, which got me thinking about grad school. And I never considered, I'm oh man, I'm probably going to be marine biologist somewhere, and I don't know, that, because that interested me too. But then when I saw this gene splicing and how it related to food, and we were splicing a gene that changed soybeans to be red pigmented for salmon feed, for farm-raised salmon, to reduce the pressures on the ocean. And I was like, wow, this is super cool and has direct impact, and there's so much more in the food industry that I didn't even know. So this was in Nebraska, and that was my first time moving away from home for quite some time, and just meeting all the people, and it was just so cool. So it got me thinking okay, I want to go to a big campus and apply. So I applied to the food science programs in V&E specifically. I did apply to University of Wisconsin-Madison because of dairy science. They were huge cheese, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So I applied to East Coast, West Coast because I wanted to move away, and Washington State was the first to get back, and they said, "You have a slot." And I had the papers signed before seeing it. And I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be so cool! I'm gonna be going to the mountains and skiing." And I remember my mom was with me, and we crossed over into Ellensburg and went across the bridge in Vantage. And I'm like, what did I sign up for? And
I always wonder about that. People who say they're coming to Pullman, they're like, you think Washington, but it's so different depending on where you are. And
so it was cold and everything. And Allison was my tour guide.
That's adorable.
Yeah. Yes. We're in the same, we have the same PI, so we're studying. That's why our studies were so similar, actually. A lot of food chemistry.
So you were the tour guide.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, so I started a semester before Kenny did. We were in the same lab, and I was one of the many people assigned to show Kenny around when, you come and you visit the campus and you see, go to a class, and so that's when we met, actually. So his very first trip to Pullman. Yeah,
it was first, I was sitting in the back with you and Beata, who was another, our lab manager at the time, and sitting in sensory, I think. But it was cold. I wasn't dressed for this. I remember wearing just a t-shirt and a Gore-Tex jacket, and it was freezing. But then in the middle of 2 p.m. it was 65 and 70. I'm like, what is going on here? And I remember we were trying to figure out how the trip back, because we flew into Seattle, drove across the state, then drove back. And I remember everybody was like, "You need to leave," and I was like, "No, we have 4 hours. It's 2:00," and they're like, "No, you need to leave because of the pass." And that was the first time me hearing pass and snow. And we're driving like this Toyota Corolla, which is so funny, and because I drove a Toyota Corolla, but yeah. Anyways, like.
You made it.
We made it
to the airport.
Yeah, we made it. Anyway, my tangent. You see where my brain goes.
So once you had met and were together in school, tell me about kind of your education experiences and about obviously getting to know each other.
Yeah, what I liked about our program was it was food science, not necessarily just not V&E, which has its pros and cons. So we did a lot of classwork that was a little bit broader. So like
V&E
any sort of hard science that you apply to food, like food chemistry, food microbiology, food processing, but then also wine microbiology and wine chemistry, and our dissertations were focused on wine, and so a lot of the, outside of classwork, the things we were doing were focused on wine. But as graduate students, we were also assigned other sort of extension work to help pay the bills for the university and provide that service for the community, and so we got to work on a lot of different projects, like apple. I was involved in the focus groups that named the Cosmic Crisp apples. That was pretty cool. And like also a project about salmon feed and how it manifests in terms of the flavor and the taste of the fish. Caviar. Got to help make a caviar lexicon so that people could use it as a tool to evaluate the quality of the caviar as it was being aged or sold. And I remember at one point we had Kenny's sparkling wine sensory panel and the caviar panel on the same day, and I was telling my parents about this, and they're like, "Wow, your life is hard." And I was like, I feel so lucky. It was a pretty cool experience.
It was awesome. Yeah, we went 9 a.m. training caviar, took a break because some of the panelists that we were training for my sparkling panel were on the caviar, and at 11 we started the sparkling panel. Lexicon development, and so yeah, it was a fun time because once you open we had the stoppers, but we knew once we opened them, because our next training, like if we had it on Thursday, our next training was on Tuesday. Well, we had to take them home.
We had a lot of mimosas, a lot of drinking of sparkling wine on the weekends.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. So I went in being like, I definitely want to go into the wine industry, and I came out thinking, actually, I could use these tools on any sort of product or service. And so that's kind of what happened with our corporate jobs. We took jobs in different industries, first food, and kind of moving around, always using the same skill set, and always in the back of our mind, like wanting to do something, do this wine passion. And that's when we still have our day jobs, and now we're making Arabilis more and more of a forefront, and hopefully in the next few years we'll be able to transition, probably Kenny first and then myself.
Yeah, I mean, where we started in grad school was like, we want to be a winemaking, but seeing all these things, it started opening up a lot of the doors of as far as what we could apply our degree to, and hence why we still have our day jobs. Like, it's very rewarding and enjoyable and humbling in a sense that, you're talking to customers within the categories that we're in. But yeah, like, it was always in the back of our mind. And same with when I entered grad school, I was given 2 options by our PI, Carolyn Ross, and it was like, you could come up with your research, like agenda or topic, or I have one, and I'll let you know. Like, if you don't have anything, I'll tell you this other one. And so I, right off the bat, said I want to study sparkling wine. She asked why. I'm like, well, there's no domestic research right now. It's all in Spain and Italy, and no one's focused on sugar. So that's why, within food science, we're looking at food chemistry, and my interest in sugar was the 2 critical points in sparkling winemaking are, in traditional method, is tirage and dosage. You're impacting the mouthfeel and you're impacting the final quality with the sugar. Little did I know, it was sparkling, very, very complex. It's super technical. Thankfully, we had a really good partnership with St. Michel to help us with the research endeavor. So we were making the wines. I was out there in January pulling wine out of a 300,000 gallon tank, and it was -4 on the crush pad, getting ready for tirage and running disgorgement trials on their Perrier line. It was, I still can't believe that Caleb has since passed, who I was working with, but I can't believe they let me, a student, run their equipment, like without, they were like, we'll show you once and then it's yours. Like they were super supportive, like funding it and giving us the protocols on the recipes and such, but I was like, kind of
responsibility.
Yeah, it was a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, very, 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 very expensive.
Kenny got to start with base wine for some of his project. And
the first chapter.
Yeah, and I also did that. I had wine donated that I kind of adulterated to make my treatments for one of my chapters. But for another chapter, I was starting with grapes, and that was a huge eye-opener. That was the first time I have ever made wine. And it was on a research scale, so I had these like 100-liter ferments, a whole bunch of them so that I could systematically change things. But the start of that was going to pick up the grapes. And my, I can't believe they let me do this thing, was I was able to rent a truck from school and a trailer from my professor and actually drive the 2 tons of grapes back. And I felt like I grew a lot that trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kenny was riding shotgun. We were not yet dating.
No.
He was my helper. So it was.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing was we got back and I think we started processing that night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there was a half ton of grapes left over. And there are these Bonner, the blue fermenter bins. And we had a lid on one of them, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is perfect. We could ferment. And so we had a friend of ours, Taylor Oswald, and he's like, we should do 100% whole cluster pigeage, just get a ferment going. The next day, because it was sitting, crossing from Prosser to Pullman, it was hot. Mm-hmm. And so, those things were probably already fermenting. And the next morning they start fermenting, and one of our professors came in and was like, Kenny, or who started this fermentation? And I was like, yeah, that was me. And he's like, those are my grapes. And I was like, no one told me anything that those were your grapes. We just assumed because
they were my grapes.
Yeah, they were Allison's grapes.
I had calculated, how many I needed to get the volume I needed for each of my treatments, and there was just extra. But it would have been nice for him to have been able to use these extras. But we had decided to make some additional research wine, which
it was great research wine. A month later, that stuff was tasting because it was sitting on skins for a month and extended maceration on it, and it was just ink black. And yeah, we were tasting it. It was so good. So good. Yeah, we got into some shenanigans a little bit.
Your grad students, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
How did the sort of the study of wine and winemaking compare to what you expected? Was it similar? Was it different? What was the reality versus what you expected?
I think for before we started, or maybe it was just I need to do a harvest, because what we're seeing in school, it's research. We're pushing the guardrails beyond what you're normally
intentionally making bad wine and stuff like that. Yeah.
Some of our wines were pretty good, but some of them were pretty bad. We were doing that on purpose to see where the limits were, mm-hmm. which I think was a great exercise, because you start noticing those indicators early. But before we started, I was like, no, I need to do full-scale harvest. And so my first harvest was in Washington, and it was 150 tons, me and the assistant winemaker. And that was heavy. That was a heavy harvest. So yeah, the next one dialed that back and did 40 tons with another winery in Washington. But I was in a lab, so it was a wine chemistry lab. So it was a different angle. It was on the client side, but seeing all the necessary wine chemistry, how are they using it?
At what points?
At what points?
What are kind of the numbers that you're seeing for different types of wines. And
yeah, and what are the recommendations? Like, okay, yeah, you picked Zinfandel at 28 bricks. You need to water that back. Like, I'm sorry. Like, or are you making port? Like, I don't know what your intentions are. So it was nice to see that at that side as well. But it was very different from the research.
Yeah, I had no expectations going. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know how it was going to relate to like commercial winemaking. And in my sense, like I've actually never worked a harvest for another brand, and I've just been kind of living vicariously through Kenny in terms of his experience. He's definitely our like head winemaker, and I do more of the business side for our brand. But
You're gonna make wine this year.
when I might make a rosé this year. But yeah, when I was making my research wines, it was like all very much, small scale. And I think that there's probably a huge amount that you have learned because you've worked for other wineries and different scales that I like just have watched, so that's very important.
I think that seeing Washington and Oregon comparisons, because making wine here, but also making some wine for Bjornson as well and some other clients, it's like Washington's doing so much different, like Rhone, Italian, Bordeaux, Burgundy. If they're doing, Charles Smith planted all that Pinot. It's like they're trying to do it. Like, and there's sparkling there as well, like Trevery and Saint Michel, obviously. And then seeing Oregon, it's like very different styles and more connection to the land and that realm. So, yeah, and different scales.
So as your sort of time at Washington State was ending, tell me about where you each were at in terms of what you were thinking next and sort of if you were thinking about doing it together at that point.
Oh yeah, we were definitely thinking about doing it together. So we were already married at this point, and we were serious. We actually wrote a business plan for this gold star business plan for a winery, like as if we had unlimited money. While we were still living in New Jersey at the time, and this was like 2016 or 2017. And so this has always been a shared goal of ours from, way before we actually started to make it a reality. So what kind of was the tipping point was we were leasing a condo in the Seattle area, and our lease was up, and the landlord was going to move back in, and we were like, do we want to move somewhere else here? Do we want to actually make this happen and be close to the grapes that we want and the kind of the wine community that we want to be part of? And so that's when we decided to make kind of really scale up and make the leap.
We had taken to get to New Jersey, we took jobs that were bringing us further east and further away from what we really wanted to do, and love New Jersey, and we have some of our closest friends there. And at that time of our life, it was great because you could take a train to Midtown, and we had great restaurants, great wine access. But every harvest, my buddies would text me and be like, "Yeah, I wish you're here." I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. Man, love you too." And I just sort of got the fire going. I think the business plan definitely got the fire. We knew that was there. It was sleeping on us we were sleeping on it for a while. But yeah, it was nice to take that leap.
Before we talk about the leap, I'm curious just a little bit about your day jobs. What have you been doing in the non-wine realm since you graduated?
Yeah, so I was mentioning the skills we learned at school were really translatable to all these other industries. So what we learned was a lot about the research method and scientific method and assessing how to make a product better. How does someone perceive a product? How do they interact with it? How can we make it better for them? And how we can make it better for them can either be working with product developers in the food industry, or engineers in the tech industry, or designers in the tech industry, or hardware. So we've worked in all these different industries since, always kind of sitting in the same place within these mostly really big companies, where we're kind of sitting in research and development and working kind of in innovation, working kind of between the marketing and product folks and the people who are making the product, and trying to translate that consumer need or that gap that we can fill for someone, and how we might be able to make that better.
Yeah, we've also, at the core, and which I was mentioning, the humbling, we're empathizing with the user, the customer, the consumer, whatever word you term it in the industry that we're working in, to understand the root of their problem, like Allison was mentioning, and then develop a solution for that need. The first one, I was working for big alcohol, Beam Suntory. Allison was doing baby food.
That was a cool matchup.
Yeah, it was like, so the juxtaposition there really was intriguing, I guess. But yeah, and then big snack, big food, and then pulling back into device and tech. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. But seeing all of those and the scale at which how the user is leveraging the product within their routine, whether it's, the package ergonomics of a water bottle, like how you're holding it, to the accessibility, like my Yeti container, like I look at it, Allison and I were talking about this in the car, and it's like, it's not a really accessible product because you need two hands. So imagine somebody with one hand, or if they're driving, like you don't want to
doesn't fit in the cup holder. Like there's a lot of these things that like we're noticing that, could make it better for what we want to use it for. I mean, for someone else, it might be perfect. Like it's huge volume, it's really durable. So like it's who you're designing for and what is their need in that moment.
So tell me about making the leap then into this project. Why here? Why did you decide to come to Oregon?
It was the fruit here. So we had our eyes in the gorge. I mean, we got married there, and the beauty there. We knew some of the sites with Celilo being so high elevation, south facing, Old Vine, Old Wente, for Chardonnay, and also the potential of the Hood River Valley. The Hood River Valley is dominated by like pear cherries, so it was, and the expense of it's really high there. And we were thinking like, eventually we want to find land here. We realized really quickly, like, it's a small community, really good wines that are coming out of there from the, what vineyards are there. And
that was one reason why we were drawn to it, and like, actually is the potential, is a really growing, like a lot of growth opportunity. But in the end, it was like we wanted a little bit more support, and that's like exactly what we got when we landed here. Basically, like one of my favorite stories to tell is when one harvest we got down here, and the press broke, and the night before Kenny was trying it out, and it just like the vacuum broke, and so he's like, we're kind of new to this community. He's cold calling people. How do I solve this problem? The pick is tomorrow and I can't change that. And people stepped up, like no questions asked, like really embraced us. And that was just like one of the many times where I've been like to myself, this was a good spot to be.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the people here, not only the fruit, it's definitely the people. Like, because when that happened, and that was just like one of the moments. But even before then, calling people, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, we don't have this, but call these three, and they'll help you out." So it's just like a constant chain of telephone, but cold calling, and but the press one, I was just very emotional on that because it was Tomas and John Groshall that I called among some other people, but they were like, within 30 minutes, bring the fruit here. And I just couldn't believe it. So, yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So what was the plan for the brand when you got here? What were you thinking, and how did you start?
Started with Pinot. I mean, we figured we're in Oregon, have to make a Pinot, Willamette Valley. Like a lot of our family is not from not a lot of my family, but friends too, aren't from around here. When they hear Oregon and Willamette Valley, they know Pinot. And so that's what we made for strategically. Did that again for a couple years. 20, we decided to scale, and that's when we started making our sparkling wine. A lot of our fruit, came off, and that's when we were like, okay, we got to start now and get stuff going to start loading up the cellar with the sparkling wine, which we haven't even released yet. I was thinking of disgorging some for you guys, but yeah, like that was the critical moment. And then 21, we didn't make any red wine. We actually just started focusing more on Chardonnay, sparkling wine. 22, we did some red wine from Sojo again. So yeah, like we were really conscious on the vineyard sites that we were doing, and the region that we were like looking for is like, okay, cooler, east facing, north facing even. Is it in the shadow in the afternoon? Like for sparkling wine, even for Chardonnay, so it's not feeling the heat pressure. As you know, like 20 and 21, like we had some hot spells. Fruit quality was great in those years though.
So we've started to, over several years, like make more and more of the sparkling wine and less of the still wine. And so what we have available is still wine, and it will continue to be a big part of our sales until for a few years yet. But we'll be starting to release our sparkling wines next year, and there'll be more and more of them and fewer still wines. So we're kind of approaching this inflection point that we've been excited about for so long, to really be sparkling forward and leverage Kenny's experience and kind of our excitement over that niche of the industry.
I mean, the focus was emulating the grower champagnes in that model. You know, a lot of people are doing it now. You have Corollary, Lytle Barnett, and they're focusing on sparkling, and which is amazing. I mean, the quality is there, and Corollary's planting for sparkling only for the first, time, like instead, using some of the vineyards that have been planted for still, like, so that was our strategic vision, long-term vision, is emulate the grower, which Arabilis is Latin for arable, farmable land. It's aspirational. We do hope to someday farm a site ourselves. Small scale, but we'll get there. Mm-hmm. We'll get there.
So let's talk about sparkling first, since clearly that's the goal. So tell me about your kind of impressions of Oregon sparkling wine and of where you sort of thought you would fit into that.
Yeah. Quality, there's so much potential, and the quality's here. The provenance is here from the vineyard sites. I think there's a lot that's still unknown. A lot of areas that I think would be very intriguing. I think there's been a lot of rumblings on certain areas like up near Forest Grove, the Banks, and like Tualatin and such. It's cooler. Even the Coast Range, like there's just being planted in the we have the foothills planted, but what about further past that? Eola is great because of the cool air, but yeah, the quality of Oregon sparkling wine is here, and it's here to stay for sure. The biggest proponent of that was Argyle, like Roland, Andrew Davis starting Radiant. Like there are the guys that started it and kicked off this like movement that really initiate a lot of the experimentation. So like our first sparkling wine that we made, there were two, 2020. We did one with Andrew and then one by ourselves. And the one that we made was all native, no non-filtered, no cold stabilization, and that's the one that we've been tasting a lot of, and the one with Andrew is like very different. So, and they're completely different blends too, and how we made the wines as well. So like Andrew's is heavier chard. The one that we made is more Pinot. So, and then it just started spurring all these other ideas like that we had.
Well, to your point about it being like the more like a really technical type of wine to be making, you have like all of the decisions that you would make going into making a still wine, plus this whole extra life of the product where you're like, you have all these levers. And so I think that is really exciting. And you see people making a lot of different decisions across the valley, and a lot of really good wines, and a lot of people who are experimenting and figuring out what works for us and like what's going to be distinct for Oregon sparkling wine.
Yeah.
Still coming to fruition.
Yeah, you're making 2 wines.
Talk about Chardonnay then as well. Obviously, the Chardonnay is quite on the upswing here in Oregon. Tell me about your interest in that, and again, sort of same question: where do you see Oregon Chardonnay right now, and what's your piece of it?
We love Chardonnay. It's like whenever somebody asks us at a tasting, "What's your favorite wine right now?" We're always like, we usually actually pick different Chardonnays that we make, but we tend to go towards them more so than the Pinots these days. We have 2 new Chardonnays coming out this fall. That'll be our fall release, and we're really excited about that. We tend to, go ahead.
I mean, I think it's a winemaker's grape. Like, that's what they've always said. And we made, our first Chard was Wente. And that was, like I said, I don't even know if my memory was Wente Chard. I don't know. But like, that to me it holds its acid really well, and longer, later ripening than Dijon. I mean, we had the clone conversation endlessly with a lot of people. So like, I think that building that complexity, like even within the wines, like if you can do that, that would be amazing. So like, the Chardonnays are very different that we've made in 21, 20, like high elevation, volcanic versus like marine sedimentary. So showing that juxtaposition, you get very different wines.
Old vines, young vines.
Old vine, young vine,
much oak, But the theme throughout ours tends to be a little bit more acid forward.
Acid forward, because I mean we're sparkling winemakers. So like there's acid forward. It's mineral, it's salty. It's got this like elegance, and like, so those are what we're drawn to. And I mean, there are some California Chards that I love, like far west Sonoma Coast, like, and they push to that style too, versus like, the valley floor stuff. And I think that's where we've been tending to. I think like for Chardonnay here, like again, the stat, we were talking to Jessica recently, and it was like Jessica Cortell. Chardonnay only makes like 2% of the plantings in the valley. Back in the, 80s when they started ripping stuff up because it wasn't ripening. I mean, Chardonnay was up there at like, 45%? I don't know what it was, but it was high. So it's like, we had it at a time. Imagine if we had 40% Chardonnay now, like we wouldn't be having these conversations like, do you have more Chard? Do you have more Chard? Like even
like trying to find a Chard dealer.
Yeah.
You're like, do you have a connection? Like constantly asking around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or looking like years down the road, people who are planting now and like trying to get your name on some of those rows.
I mean, that's what's like this thought has run through my mind around like, do we just do an estate of Chardonnay? Like Ex Novo, Ex Omni, they've done that. It's like, that could be pretty cool. Like, just focus Blanc to Blanc. Like, and I don't know, like, so it's mad scientists, and there's still a lot of people and like styles that we resonate to, like Ken and Seth and Grant and Sashi and Raj. Like, those are the big names, obviously, but like the styles are super fresh and quenching. Like, I love the word quenching.
Yeah.
Like, and that's when we're seeking Chard, like that's what we're looking for, is quenching.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it, even though I know you hate that I say this, but it's like, I feel like it's the Gatorade of wines. It's like so refreshing and like so pleasant and quenching that you're just like, yes, that's what I wanted. Yeah.
Joggable Chardonnay. I like it.
Yes.
Tell me about starting the business. Obviously, you had a plan, you had an idea in mind. Tell me about actually getting here, coming up with the name, coming up with the logo, coming up with all of the kind of the basics of the brand.
Yeah, that was such a learning curve, and we had a lot of good resources. Like, we really leaned on the SBA. There was a mentorship program of like retired executives that we worked with and were assigned a mentor, and that helped us to kind of get connected with the right people, and a lot of like reading and listening to webinars about small business, like legal basics for a small business or tax basics for a small business. And so that was like step one. And then we decided early on that branding was really important to us. And so we wanted to like have a partner in that. So we found actually a young couple who had just started somewhat recently their own graphic design firm. And so we worked with them to help with the brand mark and the labels.
We wanted our brand to be like a premier, have this like, and that's our goal, like a premier grower producer, like that is our North Star, and evoke a feeling of a place. And, you know, as we were ideating a lot of ideas, and there were some that, you know, we could pull out the brand book and show some that we were like, yeah, no, that's not what we want, or what we were feeling. And so for us, when we saw Arabilis, and, you know, and this is kind of like within our product research realm, like, and the font type and the spacing, the color choice, like it just hit. And that was for us like a big win, and where we wanted to go.
Obviously, you talked earlier about selling wine, and you'll have more to sell soon when your sparkling hits. But tell me about selling wine and about finding the market and figuring out, again, kind of your place in it.
We're still figuring it out. Yeah. I took sort of an approach this year, which was, let's like do everything we can and see what sticks and what, like, you know, where the best ROI is. And we do a lot of events and pop-ups, and we've done some private tastings also. And so trying to see like which of these things we enjoy most and which ones convert the most. And also with the resources we have. So we have day jobs still, and so that's a constraint. And we share space with until recently with a lot of other wineries, and so that's a constraint. And so yeah, we're looking forward to the next year and having this space and doing more with that, and also revisiting the events that have worked well for us, and potentially even like engaging with somebody to help us with marketing, and which is really, we haven't spent any money on that yet, which is like, we know is a huge opportunity area. So yeah. I mean, it's just been word of mouth, and, you know, looking for our customers, kind of like bootstrapping it together. And so, yeah, I mean, like, in going back to where we wanted to be is like, we were thinking like direct to consumer. We were going to be 100% direct to consumer. And we found out really quickly that list ended pretty quick, fast. Nobody knows about you yet.
Yeah.
It's hard. So like, that's the challenge.
Like,
so yeah, but it's been really like affirming. Lately we've been going to events where people are like, oh, I've heard of you, or like, you know, somebody mentioned this to me, and so that's been encouraging. And I think it's kind of the snowball effect where like at first those like cycles feel really small and like you're not really making a lot of progress, and then at some point it starts to feel like, okay, now people maybe know of us, or now it's a little bit easier to make those recurrent sales and convince people to, you know, sign up for the wine club, like things that when we first started, it was a lot of trial and error.
Some that surprised us. I mean, there's been some events I'm like, I go in thinking, man, this is going to be such a bear, and then it's like, wow, you know, and you start making those connections. I think that's been the thing that we've done really well. Is probably I go too far on talking with some people about like the story and all the grapes and super technical, but some customers like love that, and you really don't know who is going to like what level of information until you start talking to them. And so, yeah. I was judging an event by its cover that I shouldn't have, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so our next, actually, this weekend we're doing Nesquin, which is the first time we'll be doing that, we're interested to see how that will go. And next week we're going to be at the Oregon Garden. They have a like Music on the Lawn series, and so we'll serve probably just our Chardonnay by the glass, maybe Pinot by the glass. And so we're starting to go back. Like we had done an event at the Oregon Garden before and it was a successful event. So kind of finding these things that we like doing and doing more of them.
There's so much here that not many people know about. Like the Oregon Garden. Like when we first pulled in, I'm like, what is this place? Like nobody knows about it, but it's just such a gem of a botanical garden. And yeah, I mean, that's where I see like a future here, and why, and again, another reason why we chose Oregon is like, it's sort of untapped still on a lot of things. And
Tell me about having a wine that you've made with your names on it and presenting it to people at these kinds of events. What's it feel like, and how has that gone so far?
It's really cool. It's
Yeah.
really cool to be able to say like, I made this and this is what we did to make it, and like kind of convey what went into it. And it's like sharing a little bit of your, like, I don't know, I feel a lot of pride in it. And I'm not even the head winemaker.
No, I
so I
mean,
feel like it's cool. Yeah.
I mean, we worked so hard to do it. Like, yeah, that's just the wine piece. But even just like the back end, like Allison built the website. So to see people use it and see the analytics behind it, you're like, we just got conversion. Like,
Yeah. Or to get feedback like, oh, we want to make our website like yours. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
like little things.
yeah, I mean, I think we didn't know until we started doing it, and like having that response, positive response, it's, very...
It's motivating.
Yeah.
It keeps you going. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we like making the wine for the sake of making it, and we're like, it's fun, art, science,
Yeah.
But like actually sharing it with someone is like, that's the icing on the cake. That's why you do it.
Yeah.
Tell me about the sort of the winemaking style that you've adopted, and I'm also curious, coming from the technical backgrounds that you have, how much of it has veered from sort of the textbook winemaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have, the nice thing here in owning the brand is we have freedom. We're driven by some wineries that like we really enjoy and like their value system, and so we resonate with a lot of those values. And so like for us, it's looking for freshness, the quenching ability to that, and respecting the site. So like we wanted to convey, as much of that place as we can. I think for where we want to go, like in the traditional method sense, is in sparkling, is we have a lot of ideas like that are still cooking, and not many. I mean, we've put them in bottle, and there's a lot of potential. Like we made 6 base wines this year, and I don't know. I think there's a mad scientist brain around my end, like, but it's elegance and purity, and like we want to be on that stage with the big boys and girls on that realm, like. So I hope we can get there in a sense. I don't know if I answered that well.
Was it about science or about, what was
The technical and the science.
the technical? Oh, I can speak to the technical bit.
Well, we're not dogmatic. Like,
You definitely do trials. Like you're
Yeah.
like we'll try different yeasts and see how it, like you really, and you do notice like from barrel to barrel, like this one's foaming more, this one smells more this way or that way. And so like those, I think that kind of research approach definitely carries over into things I've seen you do, and like our strategy as far as what wines we're making.
Yeah. I've, over the course of the year, I've just tried not to do too much to the wine. And I have some future experimental ideas, like even with the Chardonnay this year, like, let's go back to extended élevage, no batonnage either. Like, let's see what that does. I mean, people are doing it now, but like, I want to do it. And like we were tasting some wine, and it was like we just put it to barrel, and people were tasting through, and they're like, wow, this is a really young wine. I'm like, yeah, it's only been in barrel for a month. Like, how do you even know where it's going? And you're already putting together blends. Like, it was hard for me to even think. So just like let it sit. So.
Tell me about vineyard sites. You obviously mentioned earlier you had some ideas in mind, cool sites, northern sites. Tell me about finding the sites you found so far and sort of building the relationships with the growers you have so far.
All cold calling. I mean, it's all been me just knocking on doors and driving up to some places and saying like, hey, I'm Kenny. I'm from Kentucky. Like, I don't know. Like,
I'm new here.
Yeah.
I really like some Chardonnay. Like,
Yeah.
what do you have available? They're like, nothing this year. What about in 2 years? 2 years down the line, they call back. Like, it's kind of really, it's a long game.
It's a long game for sure. And so like there are places with new plantings of Meunier and Chard that it's like, I will take it all. So,
we're still small fish. Like, we're still only getting like, a couple tons from each place. And we know that farmers prefer to have like fewer, bigger clients, just like easier to manage. And so we try to be really good small clients, like pay on time and like, be good partners. So
collapse picks if you can.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we don't want to. I want to be, so every pick I want to be there and with the crew if I can. So I think they're very surprised. I had one farmer last year, he's like, are you on site for every pick? I'm like, yeah. Like, and they like that. I mean, it's because they know you're respecting their fruit. It's their fruit that you're making wine with. But yeah, all the sites that we've got have been either, cold calling or having friends and connections that got us in. And, being good tenants. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but there are more that I see coming that I think would be really, really interesting to get involved with and keeping our name on the wait list.
Obviously, we talked earlier before recording about this space, brand new to you, brand new space. So tell us about winemaking before this space and about kind of the move into here.
Yeah, so we have been producing at Bjornson, and that has been a great experience. They're amazing hosts, and we feel lucky to have kind of started our wine journey in the Eola Hills with them. And it also means you're sharing space with a lot of winemakers, so a lot of coordination that goes in, like, a lot of shared spaces and shared equipment. And so with this space, there's just fewer people to share with. And so we're excited about that because it gives us more control, more flexibility in terms of the scheduling, which wasn't really a huge issue before because so much of our wine is processed before other clients' wines come in. So that actually wasn't a huge problem. But the main impetus for moving over here was we invested in a lot of sparkling wine equipment, which will take up a big part of the square footage. And so we couldn't stay, we needed more space. And so that's why we started looking around and we ended up here. And it'll also allow us to we'll have a little bit more capacity than we need for ourselves in the near term, so we can help other people process their wines if they are looking for a solution for their sparkling.
We have a couple clients now that we're making sparkling for, but also like we needed the equipment to finish our wine. Yeah. Like I think it was getting to a point where we were making enough that doing it by hand was one, and this is also going back to like our schooling, like we're going to impact the quality doing it by hand, loss of product, like if it's not cold, like foaming, gushing, like I mean, I think there was one person who was doing some disgorgement by hand and they lost like 30%. It's like you spent all this time mm-hmm. and you lost 30% of your product. Like that just kills the bottom line. Like, so yeah, it's a huge upfront investment for us, but like it allows us to control the process as much as we can. I mean, we don't have the vineyard, but we're working with the farmers super closely and we trust them, but we're pretty darn near the end-to-end control now. So, which is awesome.
And as far as upfront costs, like we would have had to pay someone to use their equipment in some way for the riddling, disgorging. Like that was always kind of going to have to happen. And so now we're at that point where we needed to make a choice, and we decided we wanted to make the investment. Like, we've been doing tirage by hand. This last June, we did 500 cases in one day, like on a 6-spout filler, 2 6-spout fillers. And
That was a heavy day.
I mean, that was like, I'm so impressed that went as well as it did. And it was cool, but like, I'm really excited that's the last time we're going to be doing that. And we have we're going to have a little bit more of a system in place.
At that scale, we'll probably still do some by hand.
Yeah.
Like, I did 1 barrel tirage this year, and we've done some like trials like that have been smaller. So it's just a matter of like scaling it up. But yeah, like, we'll probably still do some hand tirage.
Yeah. But 500 cases in a day?
Not 500
Probably not.
cases in a day. No,
Yeah.
that was crazy. When people heard we did that, they're like, no way. I'm like, yep, we cranked. And we even had a compressor go down. Like, so in the midst of all that, compressor goes down, and we did it all. Like, we probably would have finished. It was 9 to 5. We could have done it.
Yeah.
We were going like, was it 6? I think we were a bottle a minute. A bottle a second we were at by hand. So we had the right crew.
Mm-hmm. That's super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, those guys have been great.
And you had your Gatorade of wine.
We did.
To get
Yeah.
you through.
Yeah. Looking forward to the Chardonnay at the end of the day.
We asked them, we were like, do you want to take a food break? They're like, no, we're going. I'm like, all right, like that answer.
Like passing around peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like
Yeah.
to eat something.
So tell me about where the brand is now, and where you want it to go in the next few years. What is the kind of the goal for the rollout the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're now focused on 95% sparkling,
Production-wise.
with some still, and most of that still is Chardonnay. The red wine we're making is from Sojo, single vineyard, and it's emulating the grower model. Like, they have their Coteau Champenois. Like, we want to do the same and just focus, like, do one thing well on the sparkling front, and no compromise on the still. Like, and that's where we want to eventually get to 2,500, maybe 3,000 cases, but like intentional, and have some experimentation in there. Like, do we do 100% Pinot Blanc? Yeah, we did. And it's in Magnum. Like, why not? I mean, so like, there are those little pieces, but the other side of Arabilis is our Oregon sparkling wine business. Like, to do custom crush or finished services for them. Like, if you want to riddle, tirage, disgorge, like, we have the capacity now to offer that. So there will be those two sides. But yeah, like, I mean, we want to eventually have a place to plant and farm and, do it. So where that is, I don't know yet.
Yeah. And how far out? Not quite sure. Depends on how the next couple years go. But we're really excited. Every year, it's like a whole new challenge and a whole other thing that we're taking on. And so now we're taking on this equipment and we're moving, and it's just like constant excitement.
The drain doesn't drain. So I got to work on that. So it's like we're 3 weeks out from harvest. Yeah, it's like the little things.
I mean, it's called a drain. It has to drain.
It's got to go somewhere.
Right in the name.
Yeah. So it does drain. It's just slow, but yeah, we're going to work on that.
Well, from the sort of making wine for the people / custom crush / facility, tell me about where is the demand? Are you seeing a lot of demand for sparkling wine, that kind of sparkling wine service, and where do you sort of see that part of your business going?
We
don't.
I mean, we're not sure. We needed this equipment for us, for sure. And we wanted to get the capacity that would work for us in the long run, not just for our production in the next couple of years, because we do plan to grow the sparkling a lot. And so that was like the foundation of the purchase. But like, we've been turned away when we were scoping out, like, how would we finish our wines if we didn't do this? It was hard. Like, there's only a few options, and And so we do think that there are other wineries that probably had the same issues as us and when we were scoping it out, and we hope that we can help them out and that we can help them make like an awesome wine that they're excited about, because we also are trying to, like, this is our focus area. It's not like something we've been doing on the side, but it's kind of the main part of our production for Arabilis too.
Talk about the industry a little bit in general. You talked about kind of your introduction to Oregon wine and the kind of the friendliness and neighborliness of it. Tell me about how you've seen Oregon wine, what you've seen in Oregon wine as a part of it, and what the industry kind of looks like to you now in 2023.
Where do I start? I feel like we're still just getting to know people. Like, we've only touched the edge of the iceberg sort of thing, because we're still relatively new to the community. But we've found a lot of really good friends and partners, and we have gravitated towards a lot of the younger winemakers who are kind of in similar positions as us, or they're maybe a couple years ahead of us. And so we're excited about kind of that new generation and being a part of it and seeing where that goes. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me in terms of community. There's a lot of organizations that we're like just starting to get in terms of like formal community support that we're just starting to get involved with. Like, we just joined the Willamette Valley Wineries Association earlier this year, and like they are just a wealth of information and resources. And like until this year, we like weren't going to budget to pay for that, and it's totally worth it. And other organizations that we haven't been kind of leveraging that I know will be really important for us. And like the Women in Wine, the conference, I wasn't able to go because of a work conflict, but like it's on my radar, and I'm like very excited to get more involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, it's another version of that community is the like technical tasting groups. Like, we've formulated some groups of people to do these tastings together, and like the motivators are like, we want to do better. Like, we want to, improve our palates, and then see what else, keep a pulse on the competition, right? And then like also stylistically, like, does Oregon have a style? Like, and it's starting to like come into fruition. So like next Monday, it's like me, Lundeen, Marcus Goodfellow, Andrew Davis, David Cho, Mellemeyer, like there's a few of us like all getting together, Bobby on that, like, so I think those are forming, and like you see it with the Oregon Chardonnay celebration, IPNC that just happened. Like, so with sparkling, I think we're starting to get this conversation going around like where we want to take it and like that future for formalizing it.
Let's talk a little bit about the future then. Let's start with sparkling specifically. Obviously, it's been kind of a buzz around Oregon, and you're just starting to sort of see the impacts of it now. Where do you see Oregon sparkling over the next, say, decade? Where is that part of the industry headed?
I mean, I think it's going to be a big component. Like, I don't know what the percentage is here. I mean, you see it, like, the producers I mentioned, like Dan and Jean with Corollary, Andy Lytle, like, those that are focusing on sparkling only, and there's going to be more. Like, why does Champagne have to have, or they have 2,500 champagne houses in this tiny area? So like Oregon is bigger than that, and there's a lot of potential there. And I think we are finding the sites now that, okay, yeah, Pinot doesn't ripen here, don't rip it up. Like, keep that, and we can use it for sparkling. Like, so there's a lot of potential in that realm that I see, and even just like quality will only get better. So, and I'm speaking on the traditional front, like not pet nat or Charmat or direct force carb. Like, we believe in the traditional method style. So I think that's where like there's a lot of open runway there.
What about on a larger scale, Oregon wine kind of in general? Where is the industry headed?
I mean, it's year over year growing. It's not slowing down. Like, there's a reason why people are interested in this area. And Pinot's been the driving force. Chardonnay's right behind it, and sparkling's just right there in tow. And so Oregon to us is just, it's hot right now. Like, and we hope it doesn't slow down.
Yeah, I think, and we hope we can find and buy some land before it's too expensive, because it will just like grow as a popular place to grow and sell wine. And we're already seeing a lot of people moving here from other areas, and I think it's gonna grow. It's exciting, and there's a lot of areas that are still yet untapped, I think.
I mean, you're starting to you see some, like, I mean, places that are untapped, and then like climactically, like what are better suited. Yeah, and climactically, like people planting different varietals, like maybe also because of maybe some fatigue with, their traditional varietals here, but also maybe because it's now becoming more and more suitable for other varietals that before wasn't really perfect for. And so I think we might see some expansion of the offerings here. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other realm, like Sauv Blanc, Chenin Blanc, like those have been, or Gamay, like Cab Franc. Like you heard them being discussed, and people plant them in the, like, oh, we just have like these 2 rows of Cab Franc, like that's cool, but also just like a realm of like there could be more. So
tell me about greatest accomplishment so far for the two of you, for either individually or together. What are you proudest of at this point in your career?
I'm proud that we're still in business. Like that we've gotten, like, it's just, there's such a long like upward journey before you really, like, we knew this when we decided to get into the wine industry, that like we were expecting to really have to be prepared to continue to invest in it year over year for the start. And I'm just like, I'm proud of us for sticking with it, even though it's been hard, and even though it means we're still both working full-time jobs, and there's a lot of really long days. But I think I'm just proud that we made it to this point, and that we have all these exciting things kind of like right on the horizon. And I can't even imagine what we're going to be saying in 5 years, or 10 years. And I'm excited that we're going to have this interview to look back on and be like, okay, that's where we were at that point, So, what about you?
Me, I was just going to say I agree wholeheartedly with that. Like, you asked us 5 years ago when we were just starting, like, no, we didn't know. Like, I until we went to our trip on Champagne, I wouldn't have expected us to take the leap even just to buy the sparkling equipment. Like, that was, I mean, it's not from a proud, it's like, oh man, holy cow, what are we doing?
Keeps you up at night sort of thing.
It keeps us up at night, but at the same time, like, I'm proud that we did that, like, and keep investing in ourselves and double downing on ourselves in this realm.
Yeah, we are, I think, a very functional teeter-totter. When one of us is feeling really positive and the other person is not, we're kind of able to help each other up. And it's always like one or the other, I don't think we've ever both been really down at the same time. And so that's been important, that we kind of like can help each other out and like keep the positivity going.
I mean, it's a fun industry to be a part of, like, and I'm proud that there's this element of our lives. Like, the day job is a day job, and it pays the bills, it keeps the lights on, it keeps the fuel in the gas tank with this. But then when the 5 o'clock hour hits, it's like, we get to go check Veration, like.
Yeah.
And not many people get to say that they can do that, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Anytime when I'm like stressed about the finances or compliance or whatever the challenge of the day is, I'm like, what if we weren't doing this? And I just like, I'm certain that we should be doing this. So, yeah.
Fantastic. That's all the questions that I have for the two of you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to cover?
I just want to say thank you. Like, what you guys are doing and putting together is really rewarding. Like, sitting down and watching and learning, like, through listening is really, really impactful. So you guys are doing a really cool thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome. That's great to hear. I appreciate that. Thank you both so much for joining us, for sharing a brand new space with us and sharing your stories with us. We'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
thanks.